All right, we are on review 4 of A Course in Miracles, lesson 150. And this lesson begins, as all of these review 4 lessons begin, with my mind holds only what I think with God. My mind holds only what I think with God. And I thought that today what we'd do is we would go back to the very beginning of A Course in Miracles. And talk about lesson 139, I will accept atonement for myself. And what does atonement mean? And we'll go over some of the miracle principles and what it says about atonement there. And then 140, only salvation can be said to cure. And we'll talk a little bit about that lesson as well. So today is my mind holds only what I think with God. I will accept atonement for myself. And what does that mean, to accept atonement for yourself? Only salvation can be said to cure. Well, let's go back to the miracle principles. And I believe the first miracle principle where atonement is talked about is 25. Miracle principle 25. So let's read that. Miracles are part of an interlocking chain of forgiveness, which, when completed, is the atonement. Atonement works all the time and in all the dimensions of time. So what is the atonement, right? Miracles are part of an interlocking chain of forgiveness, which, when completed, is the atonement. Atonement works all the time and in all the dimensions of time. Okay, so that's one. That's miracle principle 25. And then 26. Miracles represent freedom from fear. Quote, atoning, unquote, means, quote, undoing, unquote. The undoing of fear is an essential part of the atonement value of miracles. So it's undoing fear. All right, moving down, miracle principle 37. A miracle is a correction introduced into false thinking by me. It acts as a catalyst, breaking up erroneous perception and reorganizing it properly. This places you under the atonement principle, where perception is healed. So now it's talking about atonement as a principle. First it was talking about the atonement, now it's the atonement principle, where perception is healed. Until this has occurred, knowledge of the divine order is impossible. In a way, we're taking this out of context. We really should read all of this. But let's just keep going with this. 41, wholeness is the perceptual content of miracles. They thus correct or atone for the faulty perception of lack. So a correction is an atonement. Atonement is correction. What is being atoned for? What is being atoned for is the perception that we are separate, right? Lack is due to the feeling that we are separate. We are separate from God, ultimately, right? We're separate from everything. And so that needs to be corrected for, and that's what the Course calls atonement. Let's see. The miracle, 44, the miracle is an expression of an inner awareness of Christ and the acceptance of his atonement. This is the first one that talks about accepting the atonement, or acceptance of Christ's atonement. Now, from this we might think, well, what was Christ's atonement? His death on the cross, right, was his atonement for the sins of humanity. But that's not what the Course is saying. The Course is not putting an emphasis on the crucifixion of Jesus. It's using it as a teaching device, but it's not it's not looking to that as being the atonement that the Course is talking about, right? The atonement that we find in the Gospels where Jesus is I don't even know if it's exactly there in the Gospels even, it was maybe a later idea that got brought in. We'd have to really look at that. What is atonement in the Gospels? But atoning I'm going to do another video soon about the Day of Atonement, right? That's from Leviticus chapter 16. And that is, the Day of Atonement is on the Jewish calendar. It's called Yom Kippur. It's the holiest day of the year on the Jewish calendar. And what was done way back when was there were animal sacrifices that were done to atone for the sins of the people. Then Jesus became the sacrifice in the New Testament, right? And he was the substitute sacrifice, in a sense. But the Course is bringing in the idea of sacrifice, atonement without sacrifice, right? Meaning you're not sacrificing anything in accepting the atonement, right? There's no sacrifice necessary. There's no animal sacrifice. There's no human sacrifice. There's no Son of God sacrificed. The only thing that's sacrificed is the false perception, right? That is what is sacrificed. So, let's see. So Christ's atonement would be not his death on the cross, not Jesus' death on the cross, but rather it's accepting Christ's teaching as it's coming through the Course here, which is to say that the atonement principle is essentially that we are not separate from God. God's reality has never changed, and thus we are still not separate from God, right? We are still at home in God, even now, even this very moment. And we have merely chosen to forget, right? We've made that choice to forget our reality. The atonement principle then would be the remembrance, right, or the acceptance of that truth. Anything else on atonement here? All right. Jesus says later, talks about Revelation in chapter 2 here, and he says, I am in charge of the atonement. Yeah, all right. Chapter 3, Atonement and Miracles. Let's read this. I am in charge of the process of atonement, which I undertook to begin. When you offer a miracle to any of my brothers, you do it to yourself and me. The reason you come before me is that I do not need miracles for my own atonement, but I stand at the end in case you fail temporarily. My part in the atonement is the canceling out of all errors that you could not otherwise correct. When you have been restored to the recognition of your original state, you naturally become part of the atonement yourself. Now, this is talking about atonement in a different way, right? It seems to be a different way. And that's, I think, maybe why some people have said that these early chapters are a little confusing or a little bit messy. Although others would say, well, this is what Jesus said. You know, if Jesus said this, then this is it, you know. So let's go on. As you share my own willingness to accept error in yourself and others, you must join the great crusade to correct it. Listen to my voice, learn to undo error, and act to correct it. The power to work miracles belongs to you. I will provide the opportunities to do them, but you must be ready and willing. Doing them will bring conviction and the ability, because conviction comes through accomplishment. The ability is the potential, the achievement is its expression, and the atonement, which is the natural profession of the children of God, is the purpose. The forgiven are the means of the atonement. Being filled with Spirit, they forgive in return. Those who are released must join in releasing their brothers, for this is the plan of the atonement. Miracles are the way in which minds that serve the Holy Spirit unite with me for the salvation or release of all of God's creation. So now this is bringing in salvation, and he says salvation is basically the release of all God's creations, which would probably also mean the forgiveness, right? The seeing all of God's creations as one with God. Then he says, I am the only only one who can perform miracles indiscriminately, because I am the atonement. You have a role in the atonement, which I will dictate to you. Ask me which miracles you should perform. This spares you needless effort, because you will be acting under direct communication. Now, if you read these early sections, it's a little bit maybe out of keeping with some of what comes later, unless you maybe, understand it in line with what comes later in the text. Now, I'd have to explain what I mean by that, but we might have to do that another time. I did go through the whole text this past year. I read through the whole text, and I probably will do it again. So I think that the basic idea, though, is again, we made fear, right? We took the tiny mad idea seriously. The tiny mad idea, into eternity we're all as one. There crept a tiny mad idea, at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. This is in the text, right? This is a line from the text, famous line. Into eternity we're all as one. There crept a tiny mad idea, at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. And in his forgetting, did it become a serious thing, right? And a whole world of separation came from that little tiny mad idea, okay? So the atonement principle was there from the very beginning. This is what Jesus says in the text. And the atonement principle is that the tiny mad idea is just that, right? It's an impossible dream, right? We've dreamed the impossible dream based in that tiny mad idea. And we created a dream world. We created a fantasy for ourselves, which is not true, but it seems very real. And so the atonement principle is basically the tiny mad idea seemed to happen, and the atonement principle was right there from the very beginning, saying, laughing at the tiny mad idea. It was a way of saying the tiny mad idea is impossible. It could not have happened because it's impossible to be separate from God, right? That's an impossibility. Only in a dream, only in an illusion could that be true. So the Course is essentially saying that we are in this illusion, we are in this dream, and we are afraid now of waking up, because we don't know what that would look like. We don't know that we really are safe at home, dreaming of exile, as that famous line in the text says. But we think it's we don't believe that. We don't believe that. So we have to kind of warm up to that idea. So I will accept atonement for myself as a very big step. It is a commitment to your own release, to your own knowing yourself once again. And knowing yourself is not your small self, not your ego personality self. That we're talking about your true self, which is the self of all, which is the all-encompassing self. Only salvation can be said to cure is another way of saying that when you do return to your true self, that is salvation, right? That is curing everything. Now we can become happier and happier. We can become better and better students of a course, of the Course, right? We can become better and better perceivers, perceiving as the Holy Spirit perceives, right? We can become better and better in terms of right perception, getting closer and closer to right perception, but we are still in the dream, and we are still not cured, right? We are still not fully healed, but we are getting closer and closer. But only when we when we fully wake up from the dream are we really cured. Right? That's just another way of saying that. And only when we fully accept the atonement will we be saved, so to speak, right? Will we really be home again in our true reality? So I know this is a little confusing, and I hope that was somewhat intelligible. Trying to get at what is atonement, and you might say that the Course does not, at least in the beginning, does not come right out and say what atonement is. It just kind of throws you right into it, and you're kind of left scratching your head. What is atonement? What is the atonement principle? What does Jesus mean that I am the atonement? I am in charge of the atonement. So anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that. Hey, bud. And we'll see you again soon. The next lesson is lesson 151. All things are echoes for the voice for God, of the voice for God. So we'll see you there very soon. Bye for now.